in South Korea, I was in an orphanage for a couple of years, and then when I was 7, I was adopted and hopped on that long flight to Anchorage, Alaska. I spoke with an alumni who, when he graduated from Brown, computer science was not a concentration; it was wrapped up under math, right? So his entire career was as a software engineer, essentially, but it didn't exist at the concentration when he was at Brown.
Hi everyone, we're back to the show, Beyond Algorithms. I'm Frost.
Welcome to the show. This is June. Today we're very excited to get a new guest, Matt Rodriguez. I know Matt from years ago, probably 10 years, when we worked together at Twitter. But most recently, I met with Matt in San Francisco Film Festival, where Matt actually invited me to one of the movies that he invested as a producer. So much has changed. You made the career shift from marketing at Twitter and Meta to a movie producer. What happened?
First, hey, June, Frost, thanks for having me on the show. And I think it's actually really great you guys are doing something like this. And in some ways, I think the things that I'm doing today, whether it's films or other ventures, what you two are doing with this show, I think in some ways it's all part of the same universe of the importance of stories as something that connects us, stories as a marketing tool, stories as in some ways a commodity, I think in some ways. So yeah, I hesitate when people ask me, what do you do in films? And my entertainment attorney, he always very quickly introduces me to other clients or other partners at his firm and says, meet my client, Matt, he's a producer. That term producer makes me in some ways kind of itchy because it doesn't feel like a comfortable clothing that I'm wearing. And I say that and I talk about why I think, I say things from the lens of marketing, right? I think in my 20 plus years or whatnot, give or take, in marketing, this importance of understanding your audience and being able to personalize what you're trying to say to often people that have really no idea what you're trying to pitch or what you're trying to sell or what you're trying to communicate is such an important concept. And so as a person that likes to help support filmmakers and storytellers, whether it's through the medium of films or digital or as creators, this term producer, it's something that the traditional film industry holds very highly, and there's a lot of folks involved with that title. But in the past few years that I've been involved in this world, outside of the film world, most people have no idea what a producer actually does. So I like to continue to have that one leg and I guess, film producer, but also running away from it. And I like continuing to have a foot in the world that June, you and I met as a marketer. So how I got into this journey that I'm on today, I really kind of want to zoom out. And I think there is a holistic thread. It's like, what's the quick summary? It's like, spent a couple decades as a marketer in B2C, B2B at large companies, small companies, and everything in between. But I've gotten the feedback over the years when people either hear a little bit deeper detail of my journey or hear about the places I've worked at. The reaction has informed me that, as a marketer and someone as June, like yourself, we know a lot of marketers, right? Frost, you know a lot of marketers. And I kind of think we're all in some ways the same journey. And I think that speaks to like our own biases. You're kind of in the same room, so you just sort of assume a level of normativeness. But to really, when you zoom out, I've over the years recognized my journey as pretty nonlinear. So I'll go sort of like back to the origin of how all of this got started. The metaphor I like to use, we're all a bit of an iceberg, and I think that's fitting, June, given your background right now. But an iceberg, right? As we all know, above the water is what we see, but below the water is a much bigger and more complex thing. So above the water, this has been my career. After attending Brown University in Columbia, my career started with getting a foot in the door, working at an advertising agency, running essentially campaign operations for out-of-home campaigns. And what does that mean? It's all the weird stuff you encounter when you're running around, which is, hey, you go into a coffee shop and you get a coffee, and then your coffee cup or your coffee sleeve has some promotion, marketing, something, whether it's an insurance company or it's a movie. And that was my first, it's not glamorous, but it's all about also kind of getting a foot in the door. And so after spending about a year and a half there at the small ad agency down in Soho, New York. From there, I joined, and really still the early 2000s, a gaming startup called Oberon Media. And at the time, I just described it as, hey, I'm a community manager at a gaming company. But if I'm using the language that we use today, it's Hey, it was a mid-stage hyper-growth startup with a B2B and a B2C platform. And I got to experience within that environment, that rocket ship experience of a company in the right place at the right time. Some of the things I did there was we managed and built out and launched a gaming community and platform for MySpace back when I think MySpace had more MAUs or more users really for the layperson. And I think Facebook. So I was writing MySpace Tom, and again, for folks listening who don't know who that is, MySpace Tom in those early 2000s was bigger than Mark Zuckerberg. So ghostwriting MySpace Tom's blog announcement for the launch of our gaming community and platform, setting up the early Twitter account for our gaming community, as well as, some of the things, even I think I was like 23, 24, and I'm looking for those opportunities. I ran a survey early on within my, I think, first month about the behavior of our users. And I was a kid. I didn't know anything. I hardly had any experience. My academic career was not in anything in marketing per se or engineering. I was a political science major, but I ran a little survey and I noticed that a small but meaningful percentage of our gaming users were using, I think it was Mozilla's Firefox platform when, again, that was a very new thing. When at the time, our company built and optimized everything around Internet Explorer and that community. And so showing a little bit of data to my fellow PMs, again, back before people were describing themselves as PMs, and my fellow growth marketers, again, back before people were describing themselves as growth marketers, and showing them, hey, there's this interesting uptick in user behavior, and maybe this is something we should pay attention to. At the time, I know I'm getting a little bit into the weeds, but we were using ActiveX, Internet Explorer, to develop code and to grow our technical capabilities. It was pretty arduous. And so that was sort of my early, I think, example of no one is telling me what to do, but I observed a notion. I rolled up my sleeve. No one told me not to do it. No one told me to do it. And that was sort of my first experience, despite my lack of experience, showing my peers in leadership that there's something we should pay attention to. And it was really interesting. I'll never forget this. Her name escapes me, but one of the senior PMs, she told me a couple of years later when she left the company, she was really inspired by the presentation I gave, showing this data and this insight. So that's something I've always thought about the role that junior and young employees can have and really inspiring and teaching leadership, even if necessarily you don't get that feedback right in that moment. But from that gaming startup, I joined, it's gone through multiple permutations of its name, but at the time it was MTV Networks. It was at MTV Networks where, it's a company at the time known for very popular shows that left a huge imprint in our culture. Some folks watching or listening will remember the days of TRL, an insanely popular televised pop music show where really hundreds, if not thousands of fans would sometimes stand in front of 1515 Broadway in Times Square, holding up signs, screaming for their favorite singers who were attending that show. But that's not the fun stuff I was a part of. I joined a really small team. At the time, I was the first hire in this small little group with a couple other executives. And again, back before really people were commonly discussing concepts of ad tech or programmatic targeting or CRM, leveraging cookie data and all of that sort of stuff, I joined this small little team to figure out how can we reach and engage our vast audience of fans and viewers across the multiverse of Viacom shows that existed globally. If an MTV viewer enjoyed a show, there's probably high probability that they might enjoy a show on some of our other affiliate channels or similar niche shows. And so how do we expand that sort of audience engagement? Again, at the time, it felt very new and nascent, but essentially, how can we reach these folks digitally? So that was a really great experience being there for 5 years and getting that opportunity to, again, roll up the sleeves. And within a big company, we hear often this notion of working at a startup within a big company, right?
Yeah.
But that was very much the case. So that was me tapping into this belief that data and marketing can be an interesting mix. And how do we leverage both to achieve new goals? Again, whether it's gaining new customers or engaging with new audiences. From there, I joined a company called Axiom, ACXIOM, not to be confused with another tech company. And that was a really interesting experience. Essentially, I was a marketing consultant tasked with telling really big companies, whether they were companies like HP in Europe or CenturyLink in the Midwest, how to do their marketing better. right? And ultimately help and work with our sales teams to sell our array of data products. Axiom was a really interesting company where when I joined from Viacom, Axiom was not a company I knew too much about. I was really interested in this opportunity to work with a lot of external clients and be client facing and approach that from a global lens. But Axiom was a company that was around for decades. My orientation for that company was to fly to Little Rock, Arkansas. And part of that orientation was visiting, the 7, 8 floor data room, essentially, that stored all of these massive enterprise companies or consumer companies that we've all heard of. And I thought of the scene in one of the early Mission Impossible where Tom Cruise, right, comes down and looks at all the servers, right? And that's really what those rooms look like. I was there for a couple of years.
What time is it?
Yeah.
What year was it? When
Oh
you
my
were
goodness.
really,
I mean, this
it's
is
almost like the beginning of
No,
data-driven
this is
performance
10 years
marketing,
ago,
right?
right?
Yeah, it was like, it was like 10 years ago, somewhere around there. Yeah, and I think, Franz, that's a really good question. And I think, I think in some ways, one of the things that I continue to think about is the flexibility of the notion of time. I think when I meet with my mentors or folks from my community that have worked in tech for 40, 50 years, I go, wow. I spoke with them with an alumni who, when he graduated from Brown, computer science was not a concentration. It was wrapped up under math, right? So his entire career was as a software engineer, essentially, but it didn't exist as a concentration when he was at Brown. So I think it's really interesting that on one hand, my time working at Axiom felt like it was yesterday, but it also feels like it was 40 years ago. And I think a good sort of, for me, I think bookend to my time at Axiom is I joined where without a commentary, the people I worked with were lovely, smart, highly experienced. There were people that had worked at that company for 20, 30 years. And then there are people like myself that had just joined. I think what was really fascinating was this company, robust, mature, that had been around for a very long time. They eventually, over the number of years since I've left, they've pivoted to essentially becoming a startup LiveRamp that they had acquired. So the Axiom I know now is LiveRamp, and the Axiom that existed when I joined had essentially been sold for parts or whatnot, and that happened in 10 years, I think, roughly. So I think just this sort of notion of what can happen in a short and a long amount of time can be a really interesting thing for me. And so just kind of go a little bit faster, from Axiom, a couple years there, I eventually moved to San Francisco and joined Twitter. And I joined Twitter to run a small global business marketing team focused on how do we leverage our digital channels in partnership with our sales and account teams to better engage and deliver, an optimal experience for some of our, largest customers and clients, advertising clients globally. I was there for 4 or 5 years. And from there, eventually then left to join Facebook. And, it was Facebook when I joined. And I joined Facebook in some ways to do a very similar thing, which is, again, to operate a global team, to partner with our managed account sales teams to, again, improve how we can deliver optimal experiences for our advertising clients globally. And then from Meta, suddenly I'm a producer, right? I left all of that in an abrupt shift into the things that I do now, which they're in some ways a holding company of my firm, 1985 Capital, which I'm a founder and general partner of. A couple of the things that we do there is focus on supporting tech founders and broadly speaking, storytellers overcome structural challenges. And in order to do that, we help provide a mix of angel capital as well as access to resources and access to a network. And I think where I look for opportunities where the world of tech and storytelling and entertainment overlap, I think in some ways uniquely positioned, but it's applying a lot of the playbooks I've learned over the years working in startups and big tech. And I see that some of those pages can be helpful as a heuristics or model for, I think, broadly the entertainment space. But really, I've spent the past few years running a series of different, experiments. And in the film that, it was great, June, that you're able to attend to a sold out theater, the Marina Theater in San Francisco. The film was called Isle Child, beautiful, contemplative, coming of age story about a high school student. He's a student who's an athlete, dealing with all the things I think a lot of us can relate to if we think back to our time in high school and sort of those adolescent years of what is our sense of identity? How do we fit in with the different communities or social circles that we're all a part of. And then I think what's sort of a unique layer to this story is that this character is also a Korean American adoptee, an adoptee from Korea. And so that's, that little detail also spoke to me, and I think added a nice little unique flavor to the coming of age genre. And so I got behind that story as in some ways, like just as an angel financier a few years ago. And it's been really cool to just sort of wire that check over and then just hang on for the ride and see what happens. And through that, learn a lot about the entertainment industry, learn a lot about the process of filmmaking and of that industry.
Fascinating story. Thank you, Matt, for sharing. I'm also curious for the audience. Matt actually right now lives in New York. The film festival was in San Francisco, and you've been one of the people that I know who is like hitting the two coasts regularly back and forth. What was your experience so far? Now you have lived on both sides of West and East Coast for years. What's your take on the differences? And you said you're uniquely positioned to sort of sit in the sort of combination of different industries and sectors and locations. If you can tell us a little bit more about your understanding on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think for me, right, I graduated from Brown in 02, then Columbia, and I think it was 03, 04. And then I was in New York City for a very long time. And then working at Twitter pre-COVID and then through COVID in San Francisco, and then moving back to New York roughly 4 years ago. In some ways, one would assume 20 plus years from 02 to now, there's probably a lot of parity between the Bay Area and New York around broadly the tech sector, the world of entertainment. I think in some ways, yes, LA has, Hollywood is still a source of gravity for that industry. But over the years, as we know, with creators and other folks getting involved, that again, like you would think, again, there'd be a lot of parity in terms of the broadly. I think the world of like finance and the flow of capital, again, 20 plus years later, assume there's a bit of parity. And what's been interesting to me, and I've dwelled a lot on this, is how that's not the case at all. I think what I've observed is how mature and advanced the Bay Area continues to be around its embrace of new tech, the strength of big tech, so to speak, and the influence that tech sector broadly has in San Francisco that far outweighs the influence the tech sector broadly has in New York City. And I'm saying that without a judgment about if that's good or bad. These are just observations. In New York City, I think there's, of course, the tech sector is much more vibrant, more mature than it was in 04, 05, or whenever it was that I worked at Oberon Media, but it still feels like it's one slice of a much bigger pie, and that pie has significant slices taken out from broadly the finance sector. I think interestingly also in New York, there's a broad slice of that pie that is this sort of broadly, I think the cultural pie, slice of the pie, I guess. I'm including in there everything from philanthropic organizations to, we have multiple globally influential and we have some of the, most influential art collections, right? We have the MoMA, and so I think that the world of art and sports and entertainment and philanthropy and education, with NYU and Columbia anchoring, I think also the diversity of the city, across all the different boroughs continues to add a unique flavor to New York City that isn't matched by San Francisco. During my time in San Francisco, it was very interesting when I met folks that didn't necessarily work, I think, traditionally in tech, how we would describe it, whether it was at a startup or whether it was in big tech, this notion that they needed to almost kind of retrofit what they did into tech. Sort of the one anecdote that always sat with me was once I was sitting next to a wonderful person on a flight, and I'm not one to chat up by the passenger next to me, but talking a little bit, and this person talked about how she was in ed tech, right? And using sort of that vernacular. In the middle of the flight, I realized, oh, you're an elementary school teacher. That's great. My mother was a teacher. I actually found the conversation really refreshing and interesting when we could talk about it from the lens of not as a technology platform or something of that nature, but she's a teacher in San Francisco. Yet she felt that she needed to describe it in this technology vernacular. And so I think that's something that's, again, unique to San Francisco more so than it is to New York. I think for the entertainment industry, I like to say, and I like to kind of continue to make sure I have a fresh eye on it, is I think the challenge and also the opportunity for the entertainment industry, and I think this is where, June, it's not necessarily geographically focused, unless we're talking about LA, it is about how siloed the entertainment industry is. Broadly speaking, whether you're executive, a distributor, or whether you're a studio, or whether you're a first-time director just trying to put together a short little 20-minute documentary or short film. It's very insular. It's difficult to penetrate. And it's not that the community isn't welcoming, but a lot of the, I think, advances or operating models that June, you and Frost and we've seen working tech, regardless of, right, tech entered so many different sectors. And through that, I think there's been a common lexicon or vernacular that's been built across that. Interestingly enough, that hasn't largely penetrated the entertainment industry up until very recently with the very emotional topic and the advancements of AI, and specifically, of course, like generative AI.
Thanks for sharing again. I feel like there is a theme already sort of forming as you described in your last 2 decades of professional experiences. Like you were saying earlier, it was growth marketing before people call it that way. This is a product manager, but back then it was called something else. I feel like over the years, at least in Silicon Valley in the past 20 years, so many new titles and career tracks are being more or less like invented. You know, it was the same thing that people are doing, but it used to be called a, let's say, statistician. Now it's a data scientist. It used to be called a program coordinator. Now it's called associate product manager or something. I feel like that trend has sort of happened for tech, including, you know, elementary school teacher is an ed tech professional. That's probably a more extreme example. But now to the other industry and entertainment industry, as you have more exposure to now, what are the things that you see like going forward? What are the new titles and new jobs, you know, as generative AI are sort of changing the world and then replacing people's core job functions? New job functions are going to be created. What are the opportunities you see beyond the fear that people are having in their mind?
I especially want to ask Matt about this job title. I saw a couple of friends posting also in the movie industry called AI creative designers. They specifically hire people who can use AI to design. I'm curious, as a producer, as a marketing professional, as an investor, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think titles are really interesting, right? Titles signify certain things. It demonstrates, it provides certain signals internally as well as externally about where you are in your career, a level of procedure, but also what is it that you do? This is where I think it's interesting whether, you know, regardless of the sector you're in, whether you're biotech or whether you're in social, B2C, fintech, SaaS, whatever it is, right? Someone that says, hey, I'm a PM, I'm an associate PM or APM. It's broadly a lot of people understand what it is that you do on some level, right? And I think going back to June, you know, how we started this conversation, right? Which is producer, right? A producer can mean so many different things. And the reality is anytime we watch any film, right, there are end credits and it shows you, and then those end credits with all those names, those are all really important people that did a lot of important work, right? But unless you worked on that film or you work in the film industry, it's difficult to grasp what it is that all those people did. And so I think you're hitting upon, I think, one of the challenges of the entertainment industry. And I think there's an opportunity. The entertainment industry broadly, we are working on, and when I say we, I guess in some ways me, and it's on a solo effort, right? But it is this, it's difficult as someone that has a foot in the entertainment industry, but also I think one foot out. It's as I work to try to galvanize other folks to come on board on this journey with me and get involved, I struggle for relaying, hey, I'm an investor on this film. Let's put together an SPV. Like here's how we can get back, you know, like it's terminology and what we're trying to do. The entertainment industry broadly, from the filmmakers to other producers to a lot of the, I think even studio executives don't understand a lot of the terminology that I'm using. And then for folks that are not involved, as you experience right after the film, at the after party, you're asking me questions of like, how to, you know, it's a very convoluted sort of process. Forms of financing, or it can be very complicated. You know, access to really good projects. Access is challenging in general, but I think particularly acute in the entertainment industry because it is so opaque. I think what is interesting when we talk about titles, and Frost, you know, the job description you mentioned is a really good one, which is I think one of the biggest challenges over the years is it's just the hurdle, the capital demands of making a film historically and continues to be extremely high in a way that is difficult for those not involved, can't really understand. And so I'm speaking very cautiously when I talk about AI and the entertainment industry, because it is so emotional. It is about jobs, right? But the way I kind of see it is AI right now, and I don't think anytime soon, is, you push play and it creates the perfect thing that you need. It's a tool like any other tool that has come out over the past number of years. I'm sure whether it's creative tools, Photoshop, Lightroom, Adobe Premiere, and more, some ways enterprise heavy entertainment tools, those have a learning curve. I think leveraging AI has a learning curve, and I think the opportunity is for people that can embrace the tool to make the process of what they're creating more efficiently is really an opportunity, because I think in some ways what that enables is the opportunity to make more art, tell more stories. One of the things I've observed in meeting a lot of filmmakers and so on is a filmmaker, they don't just have one project. We say in tech, right? Like, hey, what's my portfolio? But in the entertainment industry, what's on my slate? In the tech world, we talk about, hey, I'm going to give you some feedback, right? Or I drop some feedback into our shared Google Doc. Entertainment industry, it's notes. I send over some notes, right? For the entertainment industry, I think where this notion of leveraging AI to tell your story quicker enables you to also create your other stories on your slate more quickly and more cost efficiently. I think what gets lost in the current conversation often is application of AI, and it's understandable, right? There is a sense of magic, right? There's that quote, right? Technology that's like sufficiently advanced, like feels like magic. I know I absolutely butchered it, right? But I know some of the AI capabilities right now, Sora and others, it does feel a little bit like magic. I think what isn't discussed enough and is an opportunity for the entertainment industry is leveraging non-gen AI, but other forms of AI to help them in their effort to bring their stories to life. For instance, how do you better pitch investors? How do you develop tighter production timelines and how to think more creatively about their marketing strategy? How to better understand what the broader marketplace is thinking about? I think those more, in some ways, like B2B functionalities of AI could really be super beneficial to seasoned filmmakers, entertainment executives, as well as, really importantly, and I feel pretty passionately about this, which is to help indie filmmakers, right? A lot of them don't necessarily have had jobs where you're, whether you're working in big tech or startups or, where you're constantly, right, June and Frost, I'm sure you've had the same experience, right? I say, having worked in tech and as a marketer, in some ways, I feel like I've done less marketing and more actually internally marketing and pitching stakeholders and leadership about the things that it's sales, right? It is sales, right?
Yeah.
I love this topic. I think I specifically want to call out the comment you had, like, it's not just generative AI, but AI in other fields. I feel like the recent popularization of the term AI has hidden a lot of, or replaced decades of technology development work. Like I said earlier, like statistician now become data science, and I think all the way back from statistics and the predictive modeling to machine learning and regression and all those things now is sort of more generally understood as AI. Now we're differentiating non-generative AI and AI. I think it's a good thing. I think it sort of removed a layer of opaqueness of technology, like all of those technology, again, from the statistics all the way to machine learning or deep learning or regression or whatever else you call it, are part of the general sort of technology infrastructure that enabled eventually the origin of generative AI today, but not that far off from generative AI. And I think if this phase of popularization of generative AI is helping any industry, entertainment industry in particular, to sort of embrace a full range of technologies or help them to do their job better, it is something that's long overdue.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. I think the power is, again, and I'm thinking about it from kind of the lens of the filmmakers, right? The power, I think, of AI for that community is, of course, there needs to be ongoing like guardrails to protect the art and so on. But you don't need to know what regression modeling is. You don't need to know any of that stuff. You can literally, the power is, I have this beautiful story. I want to bring this to life. Hey, AI, help me figure this out. Full stop, right? It's hey, I have a meeting with these investors, potential investors. Again, setting up that workflow, setting up that content, setting up that sales pitch, right? hey, I'm aware of the world, the advancements and so, social media, right? Increasingly sounds such a dinosaur term. This world of where micro creators can create in an hour some form of content, post it on TikTok, wake up the next morning and it's gotten, 1 million views. And they didn't need to add their address book or like add friends or do any of that type of stuff, right? So like filmmakers are aware. And I think one of the things that I often kind of get inbound questions about is, hey, Matt, how do I maybe grow a community on social through like TikTok with my art so that I can grow my land, right? Grow my audience, right? And I go, hey, listen, like, yep, I've done social media marketing. I've done community marketing. I know growth, but you literally have a tool. Like I can talk to you for 45 minutes about your film and like maybe give you some ideas, but you have this tool where it's not even about, and these are the emotional things, right? Like writing the words of your script, right? Creating the imagery or the scenes for your film. Like those are the things that often I think is really provocative, but it's the question you just asked me, which is like, hey, how do I grow an audience filmmaker? The question that the filmmaker is asking.
Yeah.
Here's a tool that will help you do that. It's going to give you the growth marketer. It's going to give you the film executive who can give you insights into like what the market's looking like. It's going to help you. Again, these are hyper lean and mean teams, right? So it's going to build an entire workflow to help you engage with potential investors. I think that will be the power. And then I think, Juna, what I'm really excited for in terms of the filmmakers is really sort of those advanced capabilities that you're talking about, where they don't need to know the technical terms. Like, let me put it this way, right? Like the way I sometimes, if I need to like talk to like a potential investor or whatnot, I game it out with like my ChatGPT instance, right? I say, hey, run some scenarios, like give me the most optimal email copy, subject line, like run tests. Tell me what's going to be the most effective. Sometimes, right, I use the technical terms to kind of get it going, but right, we're still, I think, in year zero with this technology. So that's what I think is really interesting is and the opportunity for the entertainment industry, which is, and for filmmakers and for the studio executives and other professionals, which is how we all broadly in tech can quickly, if you know how to ride one bike, you know how to ride another bike. Right. And I kind of feel that way with AI. And I am energized by the work I'm doing, which is to help the creative community and storytellers think about these tools beyond just some of the provocative headlines, which, rightfully so is, important to think about. But I think there's a real power there for them to like develop their work and craft.
Yeah. You have a very unique background when it comes to marketing and investing. I'm curious, how do you think it helps, or how, like maybe there are some blockers you have to conquer to get through?
Unique is, I know I said this a little bit at the beginning, but yeah, unique is, I often, in some ways, when whether it's colleagues or new colleagues or peers or whatnot, they hear my background and they go, "Yep, like here's Matt. He's a tech guy, and he does, he's in the entertainment space now." But eventually, I often get this question, which is usually stems from when they through my email address or they find my my full name, my name Matthew Rodriguez. Eventually, a lot of folks go, "Hey Matt, Rodriguez, where did you grow up?" Right? They ask it in a variety of ways, and I think the uniqueness for us that you're asking, that's what I think about. I know earlier I said I use this metaphor of like the iceberg, right? Again, June's background above the water, right? All the tech companies I worked at, and so on and so on. Below the water, and this is where, just based on feedback and notes from those I've met throughout my career and life, I know it's unique. I live in New York now, but rewind to 1985, and my company's name is 1985 Capital. In 1985, I was a 5-year-old in a small little village in South Korea. As a 5-year-old, that was the year that my mother put me in an orphanage. As a 5-year-old in South Korea, I was in an orphanage for a couple of years, and then when I was 7, I was adopted and hopped on that long flight to Anchorage, Alaska, where I was raised. Anchorage, Alaska, certainly not a place that people think of as a place with a lot of incredible career opportunities and so on. And so from Alaska, then, as I said, I moved to Brown. And these are things that in some ways I think, yeah, this seems pretty straightforward. I worked hard and, made it happen. But over the years and with perspective and continue to meet more and more people, what I often think about is this notion of preparation, the things we say about preparation, opportunity, and luck. and hopefully I can kind of tie it back to Frost, what you were asking about, sort of like marketing and careers. But I think what gets lost when people hear like our various like career journeys are the failures. Before I got the job at Twitter, I think I probably applied a dozen times, made it to various stages. Facebook or Meta, the same. I've maintained a long job diary essentially over the years of every company I've ever applied to. And it has a lot more reds than it does greens. And you can guess what the reds represent and what the greens represent. And I think that's just an example of, again, going back to the preparation and opportunity and luck. You have to prepare. If I didn't get the job at Twitter, I don't think I would have eventually gotten the job that I got at Facebook, right? I think everything builds upon one another, but it's also about making yourself, I don't want to say available, but it's about when the opportunity is there, you need to be ready for it. You need to embrace it. I mean, you need to step through that door. And then lastly, I think luck too. There's also, and I think luck is just not mentioned enough. You can do all the right things. You could go to the best schools. Parents could be this, like you could do all the right things, and still that big goal that you might have ever remains elusive. And then someone else gets that thing. I just think there's just a lot of luck involved.
Totally. I can resonate a lot with the luck component, but I still want to sort of emphasize that the non-luck component of it. Appreciate you shared, you applied for Twitter like a dozen of times before you eventually get accepted. But I want to say an average person, even if they apply to any of their dream companies 100 times, they probably won't have the same luck as you have. So I'm trying to find out, like, if you can share with the audience, especially those who are earlier in their professional career and journey, beyond the luck and beyond just the general preparedness and beyond perseverance.
What's the secret sauce?
What's the secret sauce?
Yeah, what's the magic pill?
The secret sauce is to be an early employee at a company that IPOs.
I agree.
I think the secret sauce isn't one thing. I think it's a combination. It's a combination of a couple of things I haven't said. I do think it's a combination of working really hard. It's the elbow grease. And what I've observed is over the years, some of the most, I think, successful executives at the top of their game, they are exceptional. They work really, really, really hard at what they do. It can be easy to go into cruise control, but I think working really hard is important as one. And then the second is trying to be exceptional. If you can ask yourself at the end of the day, were you as exceptional as you could be for all that you can control for? One third thing I think is also embracing failure, learning from it. Sure, yep, take the moment to get frustrated and get mad anytime we encounter failure, but then being able to kind of compartmentalize that failure and be like, what can I learn from it? And then just dusting yourself off and just getting back up, getting back on that bicycle, so to speak, right? So the dozen times I applied at Twitter, right? That 12th time I applied at Twitter was vastly different than the first time I applied at Twitter. It is the combination of the hard work, doing all the other things so that I got better and better, also continue to be as exceptional as I could be, and not letting the past failures, the past rejections, the past no's. One of the things, there's a lot of, I think sayings that we learn in tech. There's one that I learned recently, sort of over the past few years, and it's through the producer I work with, Lauren Chen, right? And she says, in terms of helping filmmakers, it's you chase 1,000 no's to get to that one yes, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's what it's really about when you think about failure. The failures are not really failures. It's we all deal with. I'm sure Frost, you and Jun, we've all gotten the no's, right? You got to get through the no's to get to the yeses.
Thank you for sharing. And I also think that's a very data-driven thing. When we see things with low ROI, we know how to reallocate our resources and funding, and therefore we get a high ROI at the end.
I think ROI is a really important framing, and I think ROI not strictly economically, right? Yes. That's an important side to the equation of it all. But it's ROI in terms of going kind of back to the entertainment industry. I think things like time ROI is something that is so. I'm sure you both, the older we get, and so on, that time is it can be, and sometimes I think bigger than economic ROI. And so just thinking about how can you be more efficient, more optimal is so critical.
Amazing, Matt. Do you have like one last advice you want to give to people?
I think, and I'll tie it back to my own background. Right? It's again, Korean adoptee, raised in Alaska, right? My parents were blue collar. My father was he worked for the local electrical union. My mom was a elementary school teacher, and I know there that certain advantages or whatnot. But I think the final advice is, as you meet folks around you, it's you don't really know their full story, right? You don't really know what is motivating them, what is holding them back, and what could also be their superpower. I think a superpower I do have, which is a combination of my professional experience, my personal background, and this, I think, ethos that I've sort of shared of how do you achieve success, right? Is this sense of, I think, empathy for the people around me, and I can be tough, right? I know I can give sometimes tough feedback, but it is all in the interest of helping people get to that next stage, help them understand there's whatever their ceiling is, it could be even higher. And I think that just comes from the sense of empathy for everyone around me. So don't underestimate the people around you, I think, is kind of
Everyone is an iceberg.
That's
exactly.
a beautiful
Thank you.
saying.
Yes.
Beautiful.
We're all icebergs.
Thank you so much, Matt.
No, thank you,
I'm
Frost.
definitely inspired by your story. This is awesome.
Very much inspired. Thank you, Matt, for sharing. And good luck being the investor and the producer. We'll follow up with you later.
You both will for sure be invited to our next film premiere. So thank you both.
Oh, yeah, no, sign
Awesome.
me up.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.